And now it's time for the real news with your host, Baron.
Hello and welcome to the Real News, your weekly broadcast where we discuss current events and politics. We have a lot to cover this week. Obama's new choices for cabinets look like the Clinton administration Part 2. I guess the big change he promised was to continue to play musical chairs with the very same corrupt elitist as usual. The faces will change, but the policies of selling out the middle class, sadly, will remain the same. We are in day 50 since the bailout passed on October 3rd. Number of bankers lining their pockets with untold billions, we can only guess how many.
I'm not getting any younger.
Because the accountability and transparency that was so widely proclaimed by Congress to protect our money was yet a lie, a farce, a fairy tale sold to the American people. While we were being fleeced once again, although we may not know who has the $350 billion that we are now supposed to repay, but I can today, on day 50, after this sellout bailout, report how many middle-class Americans have been helped by this enormous amount of money that has had to pass instantly to stave off the impending doom. No, not 100,000 Americans. No, not 50,000 Americans. Oh no, much lower. 5,000, you guess? Surely you jest. On day 50 since the hurried bailout, average Americans haven't seen a dime. The answer is zero. The money went to the very criminals that orchestrated the debacle to start with. These obvious events should wake up everyone to the complete failure our government has become. Now, as we said last week, today there is a national protest at all Federal Reserve banks. If you don't understand this unconstitutional banking system, I urge everyone to investigate it for themselves. After we go off the air, we're going to be at the Charlotte branch protesting this corrupt system. And we invite everyone to join us there today. We have a video we're fixing to play explaining this fractional banking system from the documentary Zeitgeist. And hopefully we have Mr. Olson on remote at the end of Fed Rally, and he is going to be joining us by phone and telling us an update from the protest. So he should call in shortly. After that, I want to discuss the murder of JFK, the connection to the Federal Reserve Bank, and the obvious cover-up of the facts in this murder. It is very rare to find anyone that believes that work of fiction the government tried to sell concerning his assassination. So we're going to play the audio in a second, and the video is on our website, therealnewsradio.com. And hopefully around 10:30 or so, we will go to the phones and let you, the listeners, speak out. So if you want to, Kyle, let's go ahead and we'll roll that.
1775, the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And, as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, Where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this. By the early 20th century, the U.S. had already implemented and removed a few central banking systems, which were swindled into place by ruthless banking interests. At this time, the dominant families in the banking and business world were the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs, the Rothschilds. And in the early 1900s, they sought to push, once again, legislation to create another central bank. However, they knew the government and public were very weary of such an institution, so they needed to create an incident to affect public opinion. So, J.P. Morgan, publicly considered a financial luminary at the time, exploited his mass influence by publishing rumors that a prominent bank in New York was insolvent or bankrupt. Morgan knew this would cause mass hysteria, which would affect other banks as well. And it did. The public, in fear of losing their deposits, immediately began mass withdrawals. Consequently, the banks were forced to call in their loans, causing the recipients to sell their property, and thus a spiral of bankruptcies, repossessions, and turmoil emerged. Putting the pieces together a few years later, Frederick Allen of Life magazine wrote, "The Morgan interests took advantage to precipitate the panic, guiding it shrewdly as it progressed." Unaware of the fraud, the Panic of 1907 led to a congressional investigation headed by Senator Nelson Aldrich, who had intimate ties to the banking cartels and later became part of the Rockefeller family through marriage. The commission, led by Aldrich, recommended a central bank should be implemented so a panic like 1907 could never happen again. This was the spark the international bankers needed to initiate their plan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held at a J.P. Morgan estate on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. It was there that the central banking bill called the Federal Reserve Act was written. This legislation was written by bankers, not lawmakers. This meeting was so secretive, so concealed from government and public knowledge, that the 10 or so figures who attended were told they could only use their first names in addressing.
It has absolutely nothing to do with the federal government. It is no more federal than Federal Express. Our forefathers warned us never ever to allow a central bank to come into being on this continent in the United States. That if we did, we would wake up homeless and enslaved on the continent that our founders came up with. We're going to go to a break here in a moment, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about the murder of President John F. Kennedy, which occurred 45 years ago today, November 22nd in Texas.
We're going to also discuss the link between the assassination of JFK and the Federal Reserve System. I think a lot of people will be surprised to hear some actual facts that has totally went unreported by our mainstream press. So we will go to a break, and we will come back here in just a couple minutes. Okay, we're back on the real news. Again, there is a nationwide protest happening today at all Federal Reserve banking systems. Our nearest one, of course, is Charlotte. We're going to be going down there. I urge everyone that's in the area to go to the Federal Reserve banking system and protest. Our dollar has lost 97% of its value since 1913 when these corrupt criminals took over our banking system. A lot of people don't understand when the Treasury prints a dollar, it's debt bearing at origin, and we're on